Welcome back to the Badass Reset Club. I am here today with a dear friend, client, and all around badass. I am here with my friend Ingrid Jarvis today, and we are going to be getting a little bit heavy, but there's a reason we're going to get heavy today. And that reason is, women feel things on a very deep level, and we can hold on to those things. We can harbor them for a long time, and it can gravely affect our health. So we want to change that story. And speaking of story, Ingrid is here today. She is a published author. She is an amazing mom, member of society, teacher. She's done so many cool things. I cannot wait to share Ingrid with you. Welcome.
Oh, that was a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Heather. I love you too.
I'm so glad that you've come into my life. I'm so glad that you've shared your story with people, because I think that your story is remarkable for healing. And you and I have had conversations before about these are the kinds of stories that we need to be sharing, that we need to be telling women, because I think that we can, especially in midlife, when we're sandwiched between the growing kids and the aging parents and all of the shit that's happening in between, it can get extremely challenging from a mental health perspective and a physical. So I'm
Totally.
really looking forward to talking about these things today. Before we dive into your story, have you always wanted to be an author?
That's a good question. I've always kind of loved, I've always been a huge avid reader since I was a little girl. My mom was an avid reader and taught me love for books. So I just would read everything I could get my hands on when I was little, and that continued through my whole life. And I've always been good with words. Like I tell people I'm good with poetry and little ditties, and like when I write cards to people, I've always loved the spoken word and the written word.
Mhm.
And I'm not I'm not spatial, like I don't have spatial orientation. I'm a terrible artist, but I feel like I can do good things with words. So I never like thought I was going to write a book, but after my sister died by suicide, there was such a big story to tell that I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And it was hard. It is hard to write a book. And I did it. I didn't do it in the most logical way. Like you're supposed to write an outline. I just sort of
Mhm.
sat down during COVID and started to vomit it out. And it was challenging. It took me 2 years to tweak it and an editor to help me figure out this sequence of the book.
Yeah.
So,
I remember the day that this is back when we were working out in the freezing cold
mm.
outside COVID times, because we weren't
Yep.
letting our workouts go.
Nope.
And I remember you talking a lot about this and about putting it all together and those beginning steps. And so really cool to watch someone birth a book, the ideas that are in your head that who cares if you didn't do it the traditional way? Right?
Yeah.
Your story is your story. How it gets out I don't think that's the important part of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, what a labor of love. 2 years.
It was a labor of love, and the book's not even that long. I think it's 153 pages. But as I started completing it and felt really good about what I'd done and said, I was like, should it be longer? And I'm like, no, I said what I needed to say about my sister, her life, our friendship, my family's battle with mental illness, especially on my mother's side. And I feel like I probably could have done more research, but I just kind of wanted it to be a simple memoir. And that's what it is. It's a very simple memoir, mostly about my sister, but also about the bigger picture of my family.
Mhm.
And
It's
I'm
a
happy with it. I've only sold about 200 copies, and I self-published it on BookBaby, which anyone out there who wants to write a book, there's a lot of self-publishing places. BookBaby was wonderful. I also found an editor. I Googled editors in the Washington area, and I found a woman and I can't remember her name, I feel badly, but she helped me edit the book. And then I put it on to BookBaby and Amazon.
Okay.
And yeah, so I'm proud of the fact that I said I was going to do it. I did it and I followed through. So
That's huge. That's a massive win. And
It was for
the
me.
book is beautiful. It's a lovely memoir.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Sad.
It's
It's
hard to
hard.
read. It is sad.
Mhm.
And it made me just want to give you a giant hug while I was reading it. But it also gave me a lot of insight because maybe those are some things that I've not experienced, but I know that they're very common with families that are struggling with mental health issues. And
Yeah.
I think that we can learn from each other. And I think that it's important that we share these things with each other too, so that we know how to best support one another.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that my sister had, and I wish I'd elaborated more in this chapter, but my sister had the type of depression, I think it's called psychomotor retardation, where she literally could not get out of bed.
Hmm.
And I would go over to her house. I remember one day going over to her house and she was in her bed and she was on her little phone playing a dumb game on her BlackBerry. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I can't get out of bed. And I said, why don't we go on a walk? Just let's go out the door, go for a block, come back. And she said, Ing, you don't understand. I can't take a shower. So after she died, I started researching specifically this Stanford professor. I feel like my brother said I got his name wrong in the book, and I think it's Robert Sapolsky. I think I called him Sapolsky. I believe it's Robert Sapolsky, who's a famous researcher at Stanford.
Hmm.
And after Tina died, I was looking for this kind of depression, and he has a whole video on it. And it's a small percentage of people who feel that kind of depression, but it's very real.
Hmm.
And as Tina said, it's the kind of depression where it affects your entire body. So and I've had depression and anxiety throughout my life, small bouts of it. I'm an anxious person. I'll always have anxiety, but I never had that. I cannot get out of bed.
Hmm.
I cannot take a shower. Um, and so that, was heart-wrenching because she was such an amazing person. She learned how to read, write, and speak Mandarin by the time she was 25 years old. So she was brilliant.
She also went to Stanford,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, that's part of the book too, is that she started at Dartmouth and then she transferred to Stanford. So when I was a sophomore, she came in as a junior. She had done a summer before at Stanford. She'd done an intensive East Asian studies program at Stanford, and she was there in the summer and she met all these people and loved it. And I'm very clear about this in the book, but it was hard when she came because she was always like, she was my big sister, she was my best friend, but she was also smarter than me, worked harder than me. And I was like, I kind of wanted my college to be me, my experience. And she ended up being part of my friend group. And I told her that years later, and she was not happy with me. But I'm like, look, you kind of barged in your way into Stanford and then took over. And, like the day of graduation, my sister graduated with honors, like high honors. And my mom's like, well, you didn't. And I'm like, oh, sorry, mom. I guess it wasn't good enough to get into Stanford. But so,
Whoa, that's a
yeah,
lot. That's a lot.
it was a lot on me,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
but it doesn't negate how amazing her work at Stanford was. And I hope I illustrated that in the book that, that we were all going to the beach and drinking beer and she was in the library learning
Mhm.
how to read, write, and study Mandarin. I mean, she had fun too, but she was an incredible academic and incredibly smart and funny, whip funny. Just, yeah.
That's the whole package right there.
Yeah. Until depression and
Hmm.
addiction took her life over. Yeah.
What
Mm.
what age did it start to affect her?
Um, I'd say she started going downhill in her late 30s, early 40s, probably the last 10 years of her life. And when she died by suicide, she was 50. She
Okay.
died New Year's Eve. It'll be 10 years this coming New Year's. She was going to be 51 in January 16th. So she was almost 51.
Hmm.
10 years, the last 10 years of her life. Yeah, just the perfect storm for her. Her husband, so she and her husband were happily married for a long time, and then their marriage started to fall apart a little bit mostly for financial reasons, and I won't get into that, but they had two girls, two beautiful young girls who are now, believe it or not, 31 and 26, which I can't believe because they were 16 and 21 when she died. Actually, anyway, so, and then the depression started taking over, and she was never a drinker. And I think she must have known that she might have had an addictive personality because she never, like, she and her husband would come to parties and they'd bring like one dark, really thick ale beer to share. And
Oh.
she'd have like 2 sips of it. But then in her 40s, she goes, Ing, I've discovered Chardonnay and I love it.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay. And then, but then she would drink too much, like a bottle to herself at a party. And I knew something was off. I knew something was going wrong. And then it just escalated from there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hard to watch, but there, like I've said in the book too, there was a lot of really severe mental illness on my mom's side of the family. They now think that both my grandparents were bipolar, my mom's parents,
Oh,
and
both her mom and dad.
both her mom and dad. And my
Wow.
mom was diagnosed as bipolar when she was about 45 or 50.
Okay.
And Tina was not bipolar. The thing about being bipolar is you have high highs and low lows. And I would ask Tina, do you think you might have this? And she's like, no, because I never have the high highs.
Okay.
So it's a gradation. But my mom would go through manic periods, and they were really strange. And I think that's before she actually became medicated and got a good psychiatrist. But so it runs in our family so deeply, mental illness. And I will say I've had so many people that are friends of our family and loved our family, loved my parents, knew us growing up, who are like, that was really brave of you to share, because I did share a lot about my family.
Mhm.
And I always think too brave, like too much. And I think people are like, no, it's just like, they'll be like, we knew there were some issues in your family, but we didn't know how intense they were.
Mhm.
So I think that's
Sounds like
part of
it.
it, because my dad was so stable and he was such a happy, stable, amazing presence in our life. And my mom always faked it around my friends. Like my friends go, I loved your mom. Like, she was never poorly behaved in front of my friends. It was behind closed doors. So,
Yep. So you have many years of dealing
oh
with
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's also very difficult. The um the person that sometimes we see is not the person that is
Yeah.
seen at home. And I have small experiences with that. So from an outsider's perspective, it can look all, hunky dory fine.
Rosie. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, Ingrid, between your mom, between your sister, traumatic things growing up, like, that is a lot to hold on to for
Yeah.
you.
It
And
it has been.
and I know that, like, you going through perimenopause into menopause, like, that adds a whole other, fuel source to the fire of things that you felt.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
started going into perimenopause right after Hazel was born. I had Hazel at 37.
Mhm.
And I started sort of have weird symptoms when I was about 38 and a half. And so I was in perimenopause for probably 8 years. And I love the work you're doing on menopause, because for some women go through it a lot easier. And then
Oh,
other
yeah.
women are, as you know, get hit by a ton of bricks by it.
Mhm.
I remember going to my doctor once and she said, oh, I just had a woman come in who told me she hadn't had her period for a year, but she feels great. And she didn't even notice that she had gone through the changes. So I went through that pretty hard. I actually do love being post menopause, because I am so much calmer than I used to be. I don't have the road rage, don't have the ups and downs. I really don't. And I'm sort of grateful to be 60 for that piece of my life. And I just I look at women in their, you know, between about 42 and 55, and
Mhm.
I know what they're going through. And It's funny. The other day, did you know that in the early 19th century, women were sent to insane asylums because they didn't know what was going on?
Yeah.
They're like,
I
oh,
mean,
she's having female needs.
this goes back to the witch trials. That's what
Yeah.
they're thinking, that
Yeah.
women
They
were.
didn't know what these women were going through. And in fact,
Mhm.
so sad, probably 2/3 of them were in menopause.
Right. It's amazing.
It is amazing how far we've come.
So did at any point though, when you were going through like these anxious periods in your 40s, did you think like, am I struggling with this mental health too? Like, did you think that was part of it? Did you even think that it could be hormonally driven? What was going on in your
I
head?
think I was pretty aware of the fact that it was hormonally driven because I have a wonderful naturopath, and my main doctor's been a naturopath for the last almost 20 years. I
Right.
started to see her at 40. So one of the things about this practice is it was started by 3 women, and they are so knowledgeable about this point. And I just feel grateful that I stumbled into that.
Hmm.
So I knew what was happening, but when I was 47, so like 13 years ago, I had a horrible winter, like the darkest time in my life. And I don't know what happened. It was like the perfect storm. Um, I started having panic attacks, and I was telling my husband, I think I'm having a heart attack. He's like, no, you're not having a heart attack. You're healthy. But if I'd had a panic attack before, I didn't know that's what it was. And so I was getting several a day, and I lost 25 pounds without even trying. I couldn't eat. My cortisol levels were off. It was just like my whole ship was sinking, and it was so scary.
Hmm.
Um, and so I want any woman who listens to this out there to know that if you do go through a period of like that in your life, it's most likely not mental illness. It's your hormones, and your body is trying to rebalance. So with the help of doctors and my naturopath, we did right the ship. But it took about 6 months.
Oh yeah.
I did not sleep for 3 months. I
Whoa.
could not fall asleep. And finally, I think my naturopath figured out that my whole cycle was off, like my day and night cycle,
Uh-huh.
the whole biorhythm. You probably know about this than I do.
Your circadian rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really scary. But I came out of it, and knock on wood, I've never had anything like it since. And I had a wonderful therapist who said, no, sorry, wonderful psychiatrist. She was the best doctor I've ever had. She sadly moved to Maui about 10 years ago, but she said, usually when people go through something like that in their life, if they go through it, they're not going to go through it again. Like I thought,
Oh, okay.
because she said that's an unusual thing. It does happen, but it usually doesn't happen twice. So
Phew.
yeah,
Good.
anyway, but then
Good.
I was like trying to rely on my sister at the time. Think about it. If I was 47, she was 49, and in the worst, she was about ready to leave the planet.
Hmm.
So I couldn't really ask her questions because she was not available. And um, yeah, so
It sounds like a desperate time.
it was terrible. And I thought I was going crazy. I mean, I would go on
Mhm.
these long walks and listen to podcasts, and I would listen to, yoga and meditative tapes. And I mean, in some ways it was good because I was like, somebody in the universe is trying to tell me to just slow down and figure this out. And I did, but it took a lot of digging. And I mean, I'm pretty smart. So I kept digging and digging and digging and
Good for you.
talking to different people. And I think it was hard though. It was hard for my husband.
Your
I hit it.
husband's so supportive though,
Yeah, he is. But I hid it from my kids. I pretty well. Like
as moms do.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
One day I remember saying to my husband, he's like, I don't understand because you seem fine. And I said, okay, if I can give you an analogy, or pretend like I have a broken leg and I'm having trouble walking up and down the stairs in our house. And he said, okay, that works for me. But I had to give him an image that he could work with.
Hmm.
And he was great. He is great. I'm lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, you are. Yeah,
Mm.
you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that you had some friends in that mix too.
I did. But then, they'd see me at the grocery store, and they were like, you're not okay. Like they could just tell in my eyes. Like it was,
Hmm.
I did not go out. I did not drink alcohol for 6 months. I just knew that no, I don't want anything in my body that's bad or could be bad. And I did not go out with my husband for like 3 months. And one night he's like, come on, we're going to go have dinner with some friends. But that's how anxious I was. I'm like, I don't want to go out to dinner, which is so unlike me. I
Mhm.
love going out to dinner with friends.
I know you do. You're very
So I
social.
wanted all women to know that, you're not dying necessarily. This is just, it can happen.
Yeah. So let's talk about that too. And
Yeah.
let's pull it into like the things that we're going through, what we hold on to, and what do we need to do? Like what are the steps, for getting ourselves unstuck? Because it doesn't have to be a suicide. It doesn't have to be mental health. It can be
Or both.
numerous things. It can be anything that makes us feel like we're, you know, holding on to. It can be past trauma, right?
Right.
Like years ago that maybe we're not even familiar with. And not that we're here to diagnose that, but there are things that we can do to help ourselves
Yeah.
to get out of that. And so like what do you think was most helpful for you in dealing with these things that you've dealt with?
Well, the loving support of my family, the loving support of my best friends, um, a really good doctor
Mhm.
who was instrumental in my naturopath, who is a doctor. I don't know why I always distinguish that. He's still today, like MD, ND,
Yes.
um, who was turning over every leaf for me. I did have a really scary experience that I want to share with people in case this happens to somebody.
Okay.
I found a psychiatrist, and I don't even remember his name, nor would I choose to remember it, but he was male. I mean, he was a male, and I went to see him. And it was so terrifying because he kept hammering, well, you must be bipolar because your mother was. And he spent the entire hour, like I said, I don't think I'm bipolar. I don't go up and I don't go down. I'm just down and struggling. And I don't even know how the man got his degree in
Mm,
psychiatry, because I left there feeling so like ashamed and confused, and it was just an interesting experience, and I had enough fortitude to know I'm not going to let this man give me a label because he's lazy and can't do his job.
mm,
um so eventually I found that wonderful psychiatrist, and the woman who moved to Maui, which she saved me. She basically kind of figured me out, and it was like it took some digging and I found the right person. And I think that's also really important in women's health and men. Find a doctor that you love or you like enough that you can share anything with he or she, and find a doctor that really listens to you. And I think the sad thing about our country is that that's more expensive, naturopaths usually, because they're not always covered by insurance,
mhm.
but they spend more time with you versus you have this, take this pill
Yep.
in 8 to 10 minutes. So I think even if you start to read about naturopathic, I mean, I'm a believer in both. I'm a believer in Western and Eastern medicine and marrying the two. But I think you have to have somebody in your corner, especially women, because women go through more changes than men. They just do.
Hmm.
They just go through more with their reproductive system changing. And so for me, yeah, it was a support system and research that got me through it. And like, I never want to go back there again. But I also know if that happened to me again, which I don't think it will, I would know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I have it. And you and
Part.
I've talked about this also. I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but the
Nope.
whole hanging on to things. I truly believe women hang on more to weight, and not because they eat too much.
Hmm.
It's because you do eat too much, is because you hold on to emotional baggage and you
Hmm.
hold on to grief. And I do think women do that a little bit more than men. Because what's the expression? You're only as happy as your least happy child or most happy child. We're so ingrained how our children are doing, and if one of them or both of all, no matter how many
It's
kids you have, I don't care if they're adopted or if they're your own natural children, you take on the pain. And I do think that weight has a lot to do with where your family is, where your children is, where you are. At least for me it has been.
yeah.
you know
Well, have you seen it yourself? Like if you're on vacation and you are in a beautiful beach area and you're having a beer and a cheeseburger and french fries and you wake up the next day and you're like, I feel great. And you put your bathing suit on and you're like, I feel great. You do that at home in all the chaos. You're like, oh my gosh, I just set myself back. I feel terrible.
I never
Like
thought about.
there is a way of where we come in with our headspace of
Mm.
how we're gonna digest, process, use food. Like it's a real thing. This emotional piece of it is a real thing. Like,
It is a real thing, and I think women grab food sometimes just because it's comforting. And I mean, I know I do, and I still do, and I'm gonna be 60. But I also know that when I'm eating well and doing what I'm supposed to and exercising, I
mhm.
feel so much better. I sleep better. I I just know my own body so well now about, and thanks to you in the last year of my life, really understanding the value of protein for postmenopausal women, building your skeletal structure. Like I'm always lecturing people now. You need to be lifting
Yes.
weight.
Yes.
They look at me
Go,
like, "Eh,"
Ingrid.
I go, "No, I mean it." I said, "I look forward to going out and lifting weights 3 times a week now."
There you
I
go.
don't even like cardio as much, but I should. Anyway,
Well, we still need it. But
I know.
your comment before about some women who are going through the change and some of they completely don't even know. They've just arrived at this age and they're like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
haven't had a period in a year. I must be in menopause." That's great. That's great for them. But what they still need to understand and recognize is heart health, bone health, muscle, like all of it is tanking without that estrogen. So you might not feel those physical symptoms. You might not feel the mental piece of it, but physiologically we are changing and you have to have that stuff. You have to
right.
have some sort of plan to be moving through these years. And these should be like our great years. Like hopefully we're ditching some of that anxiety of
Yeah,
raising children and the
yeah.
careers and all of it. They should
Um,
be great years, years of fun, years of winning pickleball championships.
well, that hasn't happened yet.
It's coming.
Hopefully someday.
It's coming.
No, I think also that, I mean, you've touched on this with so many of your guests, and I love listening to these women who are trainers and doctors and whatever, this wide range of, of women taking care of women, is that women are not good at giving themselves a break. I mean, my first reaction when I look in the mirror is, I've got cellulite around my knees. Well, I'm 60. That's never happened. Instead of, why don't you look at something good about yourself? And if there's one thing I could teach my daughter, it's like, just embrace who you are. You're going to go through a lot of changes in your life.
Yep.
It's okay to, it's okay that you might be a few pounds up or a few pounds down, but I don't know, women are just hard on themselves. And I feel like most men aren't as hard on themselves. And so it's like, even, I don't know. Do you know what I mean about that? Like
I do. And maybe it's
and you
that they
must
don't
see it all
show
the
it.
time in your job.
I do. You know that I am very particular about the way that we speak to ourselves and the way that
Yeah.
we shift our mindset. And so
Yeah.
like
Which is great.
I don't allow that stuff to happen under my watch of yeah, but this. I see the things and then I just go, it's working though. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's cellulite there, but those legs are strong
I know.
AF and they're taking me places. And
I know.
so
I know. It's
like
true.
just shifting it and not having that unrealistic expectation of a photoshopped 20-year-old body, you know.
I know.
I
Well,
think
and then
that it has to be more about the whole package of feeling strong, feeling confident, exuding that confidence so that other women see it, want it, embrace it. But also like the whole conversation we're having today, like we need to be there to recognize that life is hard. People are going through some hard shit, and we need to be there and show up as best we can so that we're collectively going through this in a healthier way.
agreed. And I think it's also important, the younger generation, that, all they see are these impossibly beautiful 24-year-old influencers. It's like you have to get a perspective on that. You know, that is this percentage of the universe
Yeah,
that looks like that.
it's damaging.
I think for as much as we've learned in our generation,
Mhm.
the women of the younger 20s and 30s have this going on, and I'm hoping that, you know, do you know what I mean? So it's like we've learned all this, and yet we've got these impossible images that are seem to be getting worse. So
Yeah.
I just hope that we can find a balance there for young women.
But youth is supposed to be beautiful. You know, you're full of young women are full of estrogen. It gives you lustrous long hair and supple skin and like
True.
just like it's there for a purpose. That
Yeah.
plump and estrogen so that
Yeah.
you are getting into those reproductive years
Yeah. That's true.
on a good
No,
foot. But I think we just need to understand that we are going to look a little bit different. We are going to feel a little bit different, but we can do so much to change that
yeah,
starting here.
here. And I think a lot of it is, and I talk to my daughter about this a lot, is finding your joy. What brings you joy? Is it exercise? Are you a reader? Are you a gardener? Do you want to keep bees? Do you want to learn about ancient China? I mean, I don't care what it is, find it. Find what brings you joy
What
and
lights you
go
up?
pursue it.
Yeah.
Because I think the happiest people I know are the ones that have a lot of interests,
Yes.
or at least have a interest that they're just, or they love their career, or they are all about their family, you know?
Yes.
Um,
And it's
you know,
easier for young people now because, like, in my generation, I grabbed the encyclopedia to learn about things, the family
yeah,
encyclopedia. And
yeah,
I sometimes would just like flip open to, like you said, you love to read. I used to love grabbing that sucker and looking at pictures of things and being like, what's that? And learn about something through the encyclopedia. Kids now just they have access to whatever they think might light them up. They can go find out about it in 3 seconds, you know?
yeah, that's true. Their knowledge or their access to knowledge is so immediate.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Like I know I want to write another book, but I want this to be a happy book. And I just
That's what I
haven't
wanted to know, Ingrid. What's on
yeah.
tap for you? What's coming up? What's lighting
I
you
just
up in
know
the
there's
book?
another one in me, but I don't know what it's going to be about yet. So I keep going back and forth with ideas, but
You've
I want
talked to
it
me
to,
about some of the ideas and I love it.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's brewing, but I loved the process of doing it, even though it was frustrating, but I think now that I've done it once, I could do a better job second time around. I will tell you before I forget, the most amazing part of the book for me has been the men that have reached out to me,
Mm,
like men that knew Tina or knew me from growing up, or like a couple of my husband's friends have read it and reached out to me. And to me, that was just so amazing because I don't know, I don't know why, just I don't even know why. But like I had a guy, I was at the Husky game and I was walking up the stairs and it was a guy who was ahead of us in high school. He was a couple classes ahead of Tina and I was the year behind Tina. And he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, I just want you to know that I read your book and it really moved me.
mm,
And then I also had a guy from Stanford reach out who was this big like jock. He was on the crew team.
mhm.
He's like, do you remember me? And he sent me an email. I said, of course I remember you. And he said, I read your book. And just to know that it touched men a little bit too, because it is such a female sort of oriented book that,
Interesting.
yeah, that's been the coolest thing for me. Yeah. And it's,
That is a neat
there are many
take.
people about the book. I didn't expect it to be a bestseller. I really was only just going to give it to family and friends. And then I decided, well, what the heck, you know, let's see how
That's
it does.
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. You are a master storyteller though. And you your connections with people and what you know about them and how you bring people together is really remarkable. So
Oh, that's
keep that
nice.
in mind too with future projects that maybe you're going to be combining the teacher in you with the storyteller in you with the communicator and maybe
Oh,
teach
that's
people
nice.
how
I
to
don't,
share their story better.
that's nice of you. I
I'll
will.
teach you
I'll keep
I'll
that in
teach you
mind.
how to do the course.
Okay. Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share that is important to you that we didn't talk about today?
Um, yeah, I don't want to end on a sad note, but I will say it is happy in the long run. So my sister died by suicide, and 5 years ago today, May 29th, my husband's parents were killed in a car accident. So And they were the most beloved human beings you could possibly ever imagine knowing. They were wonderful parents. They were wonderful grandparents. My husband's mother, Sally, became one of my best friends. There were 1,000 people at their memorial, 1,000 in the church. They had to, beyond the chapel, they had to pipe it out into the gym and local areas. Imagine that impact that those people had. But my husband and I both had two remarkable instances of grief in our life, and it has bonded us. So what I want to say is you can get through grief. You can get through it. It's a process. It's not fun, but it is part of life. And we all get so freaked out about bad things happening. I still do, like, all the time, but it's part of life, and you can get through it.
Well
So,
said.
and I'm 10 years beyond my sister, and I'm fine. I mean, do I miss her? Yeah. But time does heal wounds. Maybe not all, but you're able to move on with your life. And my husband and his siblings are remarkably strong people. And they miss their parents all the time, but they were given such good tools to be, productive adults that they're fine. Yeah. But I can't believe it's been 5 years. So
Today.
is today May 29th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how the world works. We're talking about grief and healing and health. That's how the
Yeah.
world works, that it happens to be the anniversary. Wow.
I know. I guess I realized that this morning and forgot, but yeah. And you talk about impact a lot. Talk about the impact they made on people's lives. Wow. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Mm.
I remember. I didn't know you well back then, but I do
No.
remember the story. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your heart and your
Mm.
wisdom, and not only that, but the hope.
Yeah.
So thank you
I
so
loved it.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Where can we send people to find out more about you, your book?
So my book is called Losing Tina, and you can find it on BookBaby, and you can find it on Amazon easily.
Okay, great. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes too.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we can't wait to hear more about what's coming next. Maybe a lighter
Yeah.
lighter book, but it'll be
It'll
good.
definitely be lighter for sure.
I think you've done all the hard tackling stuff. It's time to.
Yeah, it's time to have some fun with the words. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for your time today, Ingrid. I know that
Thank you for yours.
people will have
Yeah.
learned a lot and have been moved by this. So I appreciate you, and I love you,
I
and
love you too.
I look forward to seeing what's next. Thanks so
Thanks,
much,
Heather.
everybody, for dialing in, tuning in, watching on YouTube, wherever you're getting this today. Make sure that you are doing all the things that you need to do to stay badass, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, Heather.